Waiting for Scott to hit go. Thank you. Good evening. And welcome again. This is our second week of information sessions for our zoning bylaws. My name is Heather Monroe. I'm the town administrator. For anyone joining us this evening or watching only this video, I'm just going to do the same little bit of intro that I did last week and then jump right in. In 2023, we organized the Zoning Bylaw Steering Group to guide the revision of our zoning bylaws using funds from a state earmark. With the steering group's support, we hired CMRPC, Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, to assist in this important effort. The core group consists of representatives from CMRPC, Neil Bagdis, Chair of the Planning Board, Roberta Bryan, Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Cheryl Lombardi, Town Service Coordinator, and myself as Town Administrator. We've also received valuable insights from other town leaders, including Fire Chief Mike Pingatori, DPW Director Travis Thibault, Building Commissioner Dave Carl, Paxton Municipal Light Plant Manager Tara Rondu, and Economic Development Committee Representatives Savas and Jeremy. Since early fall 2023, we have met at least once a month to tackle this project. Our primary goals are to update our bylaws to reflect current needs while making them more business-friendly and supportive of economic growth in Paxton. Tonight's session is focused on housing and subdivision rules and regulations. This is the second of the first two informational sessions, and tonight we'll focus specifically on housing-related changes as well as updates to the subdivision rules and regs. These updates are designed to align with environmental best practices and state stormwater requirements. Before diving into tonight's main topics, Jane from CMRPC will first address updates to questions raised during our first session to ensure we're all on the same page. Following that, we will review sections related to housing and subdivision rules, gather your thoughts, and address any concerns. Your input is essential as we refine these bylaws and regulations. With that, we're going to get subdivision rules and regulations. So subdivision rules and regulations in Massachusetts are governed by planning boards under state law, Mass General Law 40, Chapter 41, Section 81. They establish standards for streets, utilities, and public infrastructure to ensure that new developments are safe and sustainable. Proposed updates to subdivision regulations, such as narrowing street widths, incorporating stormwater best management practices, and reducing impervious surfaces, are voted on and adopted by the planning board following a public hearing process. So these subdivision rules and regs that we discussed tonight are not part of the zoning bylaws that will be before the town meeting. Key sections to be discussed this evening: updates related to accessory dwelling units or ADUs, affordable housing provisions, housing density and dimensional regulations, and proposed changes to subdivision rules and regulations. Handouts and redline versions are available on the website. We aim to keep this session focused and conclude within an hour and a half. For those who wish to review the materials in more detail, you can find all of the documents and redline versions on our website under Zoning Bylaw Updates in the top right-hand corner. Again, just to remind everybody, there are next steps in this process. This is not the final version of the zoning bylaws. The planning board will hold a formal hearing on both the final revised versions of the proposed changes on October 29th at 7 p.m. and another hearing either that night or a separate night for the subdivision rules and regulations. Once the final amended versions are approved by the planning board, they will be incorporated into the town meeting warrant articles for consideration at the special town meeting on November 18th. With that, we're going to turn it over to Jane for some updates from last meeting.
Thank you, Heather. My name is Jane Wyrick. I am a land use manager with Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, and I thought it might be good to just go over a few of the questions that were asked at the last meeting, and we said we would get back to people on. Regarding Section 1, the definitions, there was a question about clarifying the term zoning enforcement officer and as it relates to building commissioner. We do currently in the zoning bylaw have a definition for zoning enforcement authority. That was approved under the solar bylaw. And to be consistent with the language elsewhere in the bylaw, I'm recommending that we change authority to officer And then we also add a statement that directs people to see building commissioner because the two are synonymous. The same person does the duties for both positions. Regarding Section 3, the use regulations and use tables, there were questions regarding the requirement for a special permit for agriculture-related uses, such as having roosters, poultry, and larger animals, such as horses and livestock, as it may relate to the right to farm bylaw. The laws regarding right to farm apply to commercial farming rather than residential uses that may desire such animals, but we're still continuing to research this topic, and which will be completed prior to the public hearing with the planning board. There were no questions on Section 4, the dimensional regulations. Section 6, administration and enforcement. One resident noted that references to the Board of Selectmen should be Select Board. So all references, not just in that chapter, but throughout the zoning bylaw document, were changed to Select Board. There were no comments under Section 7, the floodplain district. Those proposed changes were per the new state model floodplain bylaw and updates to the FEMA flood maps. There was one question regarding Section 13 on off-street loading and parking. The question had to do with whether there was language regarding the dimming of parking lot lighting at nighttime or when a business is not open. Currently, there is not. There's a similar statement in the sign section, which currently is Section 5.3, and we were proposing that it be changed to its own separate chapter, Section 12. But should any dimming of parking lot lighting be proposed, it would include a requirement that the lighting maintain sufficient lighting to provide personal safety and security. The last one, Section 14, with site plan approval, and there were no comments or questions on that one. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Section 5, special regulations, is going to be our first section. The proposed amendments reformat and renumber sections for clarity and relocate definitions to Section 1.3. Key subsections, including signs, off-street parking, site plan approval, and accessory apartments, will be moved to their own sections, while a new subsection will establish standards for common driveways. References to the sign officer will be updated to building commissioner to reflect current practices. These changes make the bylaws easier to navigate and ensure better organization, while new standards for common driveways will improve access and help preserve natural and historic features. And then Jane will be back to go over that. Yes, ma'am.
Like last week, I'll stand in front so I can see the screen.
You want to grab the
Just grab the
microphone?
mic.
Just grab the
Oh,
microphone.
you're right. Thank you. At the beginning, we noted last week, for those who weren't here or watching online, some of the numbering is confusing where it would have Section 1, Subsection 1, Subsection 1. We thought that it might be make more sense to go 1A, 1B, rather than having all numerals. So that's why you're seeing some of the changes in the formatting. The sign section was relocated, so we covered that, I believe, last week. Or that one's upcoming, I'm sorry.
It's coming.
It's upcoming. So Section 5.5 is the proposed new common driveway bylaw. The purpose of it is to provide guidelines for the planning board to permit them, and it would reduce the number of access points on either public or private streets. It can protect wetlands and sensitive natural areas from disturbance, and it can preserve historic streetscapes when these driveways meet reasonable construction and design standards. They may be allowed by special permit from the planning board in all zoning districts, but only to deal with topographic or safety issues as determined by the planning board and in accordance with the following provisions. The lots that are to be served by the common driveway need to meet minimum dimensional standards of the zoning bylaw. The lots must have access to the street where the lots are served with legal frontage. For residential districts, the driveway, common driveway should be 18 feet wide, and for industrial or commercial drives, it is a minimum of 25 feet. The maximum grade is 10%, and then within 50 feet of the street line, it needs to go down to 3% to provide a transition area to the public way. The maximum length of a common driveway is 500 feet. And the curb cut for it cannot be any closer than 100 feet to an intersecting way for safety reasons. And then there are both residential and commercial or industrial standards for the physical construction of the road base, the binder, and the top course. And then the maximum number of lots to be served by a common drive is 2. The minimum centerline radius is 60 feet, and that refers to emergency vehicle turnaround area at the end of the driveway. And the driveway needs to be located entirely within the lots that it's serving. Site distance needs to be in accordance with the Mass Highway standards. In no case shall it be less than 200 feet. And the permit holder shall record a plan for the commercial driveway, such as an easement and a maintenance agreement, so that anyone who has property along the common driveway has a clear understanding about what the responsibilities are. Private driveways branching off of the common driveway shall be reviewed and approved in each case by the Highway Department, Fire Department, Police Department to ensure there is adequate emergency vehicle access, as well as Paxton Municipal Light Department for power distribution.
Jane, question?
Yes.
Under 13, the branching off, if there's only 2 lots that are allowed, wouldn't there be one main entrance? Or are you saying we could end up with a Y?
If it was more than one, then there would be private driveways off of the common driveway.
Off of the access point, then?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Underground utilities shall be provided on common driveways unless the planning board makes findings in open meeting that underground utilities are not practical due to either extreme topographical or environmental constraints or safety issues. And above-ground utilities shall not be allowed just for the convenience or preference of the petitioner. An occupancy permit for any structure accessed via the common driveway shall not be granted until street numbers of the lots serviced by the driveway are clearly posted in a form approved by the planning board so that it's visible from both directions of travel. And they're also posted on a permanent post at the point at which each driveway splits from the common driveway. And applicants must provide drainage calculations relative to the design of the common driveway in accordance with Section 4B of the Subdivision regulations, and to propose any mitigation for impacts to stormwater quantity and quality. And the occupancy permit for any structure accessed via the common drive shall not be granted until the common driveway site work is 100% complete. In order to be considered complete, the design engineer must submit a stamped letter certifying the common driveway site work has been constructed as shown on the approved plans. No changes proposed for section 5.7, the open display or open storage. Same with environmental review standards, except for the numbering. Temporary access apartments was changed to a new chapter, which we'll discuss a little later on. No changes to fencing or hedges except for the formatting. And that's it. Are there any questions?
I guess I still have one. On a
Sure.
common driveway. So the street numbering has to appear at the intersection with whatever the main road is. So it would be like 12A and 12B of whatever that street is.
Sure.
Okay. And then are we allowing like postal vehicles to have, is the mailbox or that point served on the main road versus like a traditional home? You'd have a driveway with a mailbox in front, so there would be two mailboxes there, nothing where and what about trash pickup and things like that? Just want to make sure we understand.
There would be an easement along the common driveway for utilities and emergency vehicle access. My understanding is the town does not have town trash pickup. It's through private entities, but I would think that, no?
But it's under contract.
So it's a private entity that's contracted through the town to provide services to every municipality in
Okay,
town.
so they would be included in the easement. The post office is federal, it's a different, they have different regulations. I know they tend to want to cluster as many boxes together to save time.
Ease of delivery, yes.
I'm assuming they will put all the boxes out by the main street, or ask the owners to put it out by the main street.
But is that something we need clarification on, or are you just going to let it, when it comes before the planning board, we would discuss it that way?
Well, I imagine if someone proposes putting a mailbox somewhere else, you guys approve it, and the postal service says they're not going to deliver to that mailbox, they'll make adjustments.
All right, I guess I'm more concerned with trash pickup. So because we have to have a turnaround at the end of this common road, so that vehicle, the trucks could go in, turn around and come out.
Correct.
So you just want to make sure that trash pickup is at the main road?
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking. I don't want to have confusion. So if you have a 500-foot driveway that then branches off to two separate residences, would the trash pickup be at the beginning of the 500 feet or at the turnaround at the end of the 500 feet where the driveways come into the common? You see where I'm going? I just want to make sure that we understand what we're telling people they need to do.
I would think it would be at the wherever the street it comes off of.
Makes sense to me, but
Right,
again,
right.
there's some confusion.
Because
So
I know the
just
truck would never go up the driveway to get it, so.
Correct, okay. Just, I think we need to clarify that, that's all I'm
Sure.
asking. Okay.
Sure, we can add a statement to that effect.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? No? Okay. Any questions online at home? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next section. Thanks, Jane. The next section we have is Section 9, Senior Housing. The proposed amendments to the Senior Residential Developments, or SRDs, bylaw aim to increase housing availability for older residents and those with disabilities by lowering the age requirement from 62 to 55, or allowing younger residents with disabilities. It includes universal design standards for aging in place, requiring features like automatic sprinklers for safety. The amendments also streamline section formatting and address minor grammatical updates. These changes will make SRDs more accessible, safer, and better suited for long-term residency. Jane?
Okay, for this one, we changed the purpose statement to the purpose of this bylaw is to increase the supply of housing that is available to older residents and residents with disabilities in a way that is in harmony with the land use goals of the town of Paxton. Previously, this bylaw did not have any provisions for residents with disabilities. Again, we changed the formatting, numbering and to lettering. And under subsection C of the density standards, we changed it to say, sorry.
I'm trying to do too many things.
Okay. Buildings shall be, rather than stating located, we changed it to in close proximity to each other to facilitate pedestrian access and to preserve open space. And the rest of that subsection is not changed. There was a typographical error under B where it said the rather than there. So that's just changing it to be grammatically correct. Under subsection E, regarding common land, it previously referred to the maximum percent of such land that may be subject to pavement. We changed pavement to non-permeable ground cover. Regarding handicap accessibility, we added an extra statement that requires the design to be consistent with universal design standards as defined by the design requirements and the guidelines for multifamily new construction from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And that will allow people to stay in their homes longer. It's not necessarily 100% ADA accessible, but it does provide for design that it comes close to it. So if people were to become incapacitated, they could still maneuver about their home and not have to move. We added a statement requiring sprinklers for every structure containing a dwelling unit or in close proximity to a building or structure containing a dwelling unit as determined by the fire chief and building inspector. And they shall provide adequate system of automatic sprinklers in accordance with the provisions of state building code. We added Paxton Municipal Light Department to the filing requirement so that they can also review applications for the electrical consumption or the anticipated electrical consumption.
And that's it for that section.
Okay.
So Jane, I know we have one question online. Is there any questions in the audience? No? Okay. The question online from Robin Tasca is, would this age change be applicable to the current senior housing?
Current senior housing would be pre-existing, non-conforming with the new bylaw. But, yeah, I must have missed that on there. Currently, the bylaw says age 62 or over, and we're looking to bring it back down to 55 to allow more opportunities for people.
Excellent. Any other questions at home? Don't see any. All right, so we're going to move on. Section 10, inclusionary zoning. The proposed amendments to Section 10 clarify inclusionary housing requirements by specifying that any development with 6 or more dwelling units or 6 or more lots is subject to the bylaw. Definitions will be relocated to Section 1.3 for consistency across the zoning bylaws. This change is important to eliminate confusion and ensure clear criteria for developers. Currently, the bylaw is unclear whether it applies to lots or units, but the amendments will standardize the language to include both.
As we noted last week, for those who were watching, we had recommended that definitions be changed from all of the chapters and put into section 1.3 so that it's easier to find all the definitions. So that's why they are lined out here. Under the applicability, we added some additional language stating that any development resulting in a net increase of 6 or more dwelling units is subject to inclusionary housing. The way it is currently written in this section, it refers to 6 or more lots. In section 10.4 below, it refers to 6 or more dwelling units. And so to bring clarity to whether we're talking about subdivisions of 6 or more lots or the addition of 6 or more dwelling units, we're just trying to clarify it by identifying both dwelling units and lots.
I think that's it.
That's it.
Short section.
Yeah.
Any questions on that in the audience? Okay, any questions at home? Okay. You want to do subdivision or ADUs next? Do ADUs. Okay. Section 15, accessory dwelling units. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts approved the Affordable Housing Act in August of 2024, which includes provisions for accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, to be allowed by right in all communities starting in February of 2025, up to 900 square feet or half the size of the primary residence. Communities can set reasonable dimensional regulations but cannot limit bedrooms, occupants, or require income restrictions or family occupancy for ADUs. These changes are important to expand housing opportunities and comply with state law. Currently, Paxton's bylaw is out of compliance. The group's recommendation is to have the current restrictions apply to all ADUs that are outside the scope of the state's definition. Want the chart first?
Sure. Heather just mentioned,
Oh, I guess it's right there.
sorry. Heather just mentioned the basic requirements. The state law says that ADUs are permitted by right in all zoning districts that allow single-family residences. And per the definition of ADUs, they are a self-contained unit, including sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities on the same lot as a principal dwelling, subject to otherwise applicable dimensional and parking requirements. They maintain a separate entrance from the principal residence sufficient to meet the state building code for safe egress. They are not larger than 1/2 the area of the principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. And they are subject to additional restrictions as may be imposed by the municipality, but not limited to additional size restrictions and restrictions or prohibitions on short-term rentals. And no municipality shall unreasonably restrict the creation of a rental of an accessory dwelling unit that is not a short-term rental. So what can towns restrict? They can restrict dimensional regulations such as setbacks, bulk and height of the structure, site plan review if a community so chooses, and you can prohibit or restrict the use of ADUs for short-term rentals. What can towns not do? They cannot require owner occupancy. They cannot require more than one parking space for the unit, and they cannot require approval of a special permit. And if you're online, there is a link to the actual state statute if you'd like to go through that yourself. It's rather long, so you want to go to Chapter 50, Sections 7 and 8. And now for the proposed changes to the bylaw, which is currently called accessory apartments. To be consistent with the definition and the language that the state is using, we would recommend changing that to accessory dwelling units. It is currently located in Section 5.9. We're recommending that it be in its own standalone chapter or section 15. oh, this is the clean version.
Would you like the non-clean version?
Probably. We have both the marked up version, which may be difficult to read because there are so many strike-throughs and additions. And this is just the clean to show how it would look once those are, if and when those are implemented. Regarding the purpose, number E, I can tell you is one that is being added, and that is to be in conformance with the requirements set forth in Mass General Law, Chapter 150 of the Acts of 2024, Sections 7 and 8. Chapter 7, or Section 7, is actually already in effect. It includes the definition. Everything else that is in the bylaw or recommended in the bylaw is from Section 8, and as Heather mentioned, goes into effect 180 days after the act was approved, which brings us to February 2nd, 2025. It's loading, okay.
So Jane, if I recall correctly from our conversation last night, so predominantly, the majority of the document, if I remember correct, didn't change. We simply put a provision that says we're going to follow state law, and if you're outside the scope of this, we're going to then apply what we've already had. Is that correct? Did we change it and I'm not recalling correctly?
You're not recalling correct. So we're changing the terminology from accessory apartment to accessory dwelling unit. We're stating that there's only one accessory dwelling unit permitted per single-family residential lot. And we're almost there.
Still trying to load. It's too big.
We have the size limitations of up to 900 square feet or 1/2 the area of the main house, whichever is smaller. It states that in addition to the 2 parking spaces required for the primary residence, only 1 additional parking space is required for the ADU. And communities can require that there's only 1 shared driveway for the property rather than approving additional curb cuts.
Just to follow up, if I may.
Yeah,
The current procedure that we have in place in town right now, if you have the new terminology of an accessory dwelling unit, we used to call it a temporary accessory apartment,
correct.
had a 2-year renewal. So every 2 years, if you were continuing to use that space for that purpose, you had to reapply with some sort of application fee. It was minimal, but it also allowed the planning board to review any changes or anything along those lines. So that process now will go away.
That's correct.
So the people that have these units in their homes, whether for in-laws or children or whatever, that will stop that process or that practice. Once it's in effective February of '25,
Yes.
they will be kind of grandfathered in as long as it's there. Is that, okay?
Yes,
Just wanted
that's
to
my
make sure.
understanding.
Okay.
Because the purpose of the law is to try to provide opportunities for more housing opportunities, seeing we have such a shortage in the state.
Okay.
So it's trying not to be too limiting. You cannot limit the units to deed-restricted affordable housing units. You cannot restrict it to family members. So by their size, they will most likely be more affordable than a larger home. One would expect that, but we can't restrict it to that.
Okay, and just to take a little further discussion that we had last evening, if the ADU is not attached to the main residence,
Correct.
one of the limiting factors at this point, we're still not sure what's going to happen, but again, I think the citizens in town, if they're watching, need to be aware, you're still limited by the septic design of the property that you have. So if you have a 3-bedroom home and you're looking at creating a 500 or 600 square foot separate structure on your property, you still need to make sure that the septic system, the septic design can handle that increase of the one bathroom along with the cooking and the sleeping and all of that stuff.
That's correct, and that's determined by the number of bedrooms.
Correct.
So either you would have to have a septic system that's already built to support the additional bedrooms, or you would need to modify the septic field.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very large document, one section 6. Are there any questions so far in the audience on this?
I wish I could help you out and take up some time, Heather, but I
No, that's fine.
don't get it.
Anything at home?
So as we mentioned, the communities can have reasonable restrictions such as setbacks and height. In this document, we are recommending that if it's a detached structure, that it is compatible with the main structure and design of materials. It's not dictating what type of materials you use, but it just should fit in with the area.
It also has to go through like a site plan review if it's going to be detached. So it's not just the Wild West where you say, I'm going to put one in.
Correct, and
There
that's
are-
to make sure that you can meet the setbacks.
Correct.
So if it's, closer into town in a smaller lot, depending on what your lot size is and what the footprint is of the main house, you may or may not have enough room to meet setbacks and put another structure.
Okay.
But on acreage, it should be fine.
Is that the only part of the site plan review that that is enforceable? So if somebody were to come and want to, have an accessory dwelling unit that's detached and the planning board requires a site plan review, is that the only thing during the site plan review that the planning board has control over?
Well, no, it would follow all general building purposes. So the building inspector would be involved, the building permit would be required, and that would then check setbacks. It would check how are they going to use sanitary services on the lot. I mean, there's a full review that takes place. We just wanted to make sure that, as I use the term Wild West, that you go do what you want and then we'll worry about it later. We're not going to do that. So the means are in place right now for checks and balances to make sure that it's appropriate. Okay? I mean, do you agree? Am I?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's correct. Hey, look at that, we're there. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of strike-throughs, changing accessory apartment to accessory dwelling unit, adding in the size limitations or allowances per the state law, and removing any reference to requiring that the unit or the main unit be owner-occupied. We're noting that the town can require reasonable restrictions, as the state law refers to it, and that any ADUs need to be, or meet the requirements of Mass General Law.
Jane,
Yes,
is there a definition of short-term rental?
there is. Short-term rental law was passed in 2019. No, 2018. It went into effect July of 2019.
Do you know any of the parameters of that in terms of term?
Well, first of all, it requires that you register with the Department of Revenue, and that you charge a 6% room occupancy tax for the state. If there are any other local requirements, then you have to meet those. That it allows towns to develop their own short-term rental bylaws, to charge an additional room occupancy tax for local tax. And if it's more of an investor that has multiple short-term rentals in town, you can charge up to another 3% in a community impact fee for all of the administration, licensing,
Okay.
inspections for all of those
All right.
units.
I just want to clarify a little bit, though. But if you have an ADU on your property, I'm more interested in the term, like, is it,
31 days or less, Neil, according to.
that's short-term? Okay, so we just want to make sure that you're not turning it over. Like, you could have a one-year lease that could be renewed, but okay, 31 days. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize that
No,
was what you were asking.
it's more for the information for those watching this tonight or in future dates to
Yeah.
understand why we're doing some of the things that we're doing.
I know there are some websites that will rent fully furnished units to like traveling nurses, and they'll state it has to be at least more than 30 days, just so it's not considered a short-term rental. Only one accessory dwelling unit will be created within a single-family dwelling or a detached structure. Item number 3, which required the owner to live on the premises, is deleted. The accessory dwelling unit shall be designed so that to the degree reasonably feasible, the appearance will still look like a single-family residence. And the entrance should be on the side or the rear of the building. We deleted the end of that statement that states that the increase in square footage of the original house cannot be more than 10%, which is not in agreement with the current law. Accessory dwelling unit shall conform to the applicable standards of health, building, and other codes. And then, seeing it's not a special permit, I'm open to discussion on how much time the Board of Health would need to review a building permit plan. It used to say 35. I don't know if that's no longer relevant without a special permit. And that sanitary facilities are based on the proposed number of bedrooms, not residents. And then addition to the 2 off-street parking spaces for the primary residence, 1 off-street parking space shall be available for use by the tenants. An accessory dwelling unit shall be clearly subordinate part of the single-family dwelling or as a detached structure. The previous limitations to 600 square feet or 25% of the primary residence area has been deleted. Any other appropriate or reasonable restrictions deemed necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare of the single-family character neighborhood, provided it is in accordance with the state law. Application procedures would be to apply for a building permit for an accessory dwelling unit made to the building commissioner in accordance with the building permit procedures of this bylaw and Mass General Law. Subsection A, requiring a notarized letter stating that the owner will occupy, is deleted. And as far as the required renewal under section 15.4 is no longer valid, so that subsection is deleted. And I think that is it.
Any questions in the audience? Okay. Any questions online? All right, thanks. Jane? All right, the last topic for this evening is subdivision rules and regulations. The proposed amendments to the subdivision rules and regulations aim to align Paxton's bylaws with EPA stormwater management, or MS4, requirements, based on recommendations from the 2023 Fuss and O'Neill report. These changes include narrowing street widths, allowing permeable pavement, reducing impervious surfaces to minimize stormwater runoff and promote groundwater recharge. Compliance is crucial, as the town has 4 years to meet MS4 standards or face potential fines. Currently, regulations require wider streets and more impervious surfaces, but the proposed changes will modernize, clarify the rules while supporting environmental sustainability and maintaining public safety.
mentioned. We've worked with the Director of Public Works or Highway Department, as well as the Fire Chief, in going over some of the recommended changes in the Fuss and O'Neill study, which included narrowing streets, allowing for different types of pavement, trying to preserve as much of the native vegetation as possible to allow for more rainwater infiltration into the aquifer rather than adding to the stormwater runoff issues. So with that,
Make it bigger.
what?
You can make it bigger.
Okay. The colors threw me off. It seems with track changes, anytime someone else makes a change, it changes colors, so. Just changing the effective date. Regulations shall be adopted by the planning board under the authority of the subdivision control law. And sections 81K through 81GG in the subdivision control law, and they supersede all previous subdivision rules of the board. And these regulations are adopted for protecting the safety, convenience, and welfare of people in the town of Paxton by regulating planning and construction of access ways, sanitation, and where appropriate, parks and open space in subdivisions. The powers of the planning board under the subdivision control law shall be exercised with due regard for provision of adequate access, avoiding congestion, avoiding danger in the operation of motor vehicles, ensuring safety in the case of fire, flood, or other emergencies, ensuring compliance with zoning bylaws, and ensuring adequate provision for water, sewage, drainage, underground utility services, fire, police, and other municipal infrastructure. And for coordinating access ways in subdivisions, in a subdivision with each other, and with the public ways in the town, and with access ways in neighboring subdivisions. Just a little bit of language change in the beginning of the definition section, stating that the definitions below are to set out the meanings of these terms. Some minor changes adding that the board refers to the planning board of the town of Paxton established pursuant to Mass General Law or its agent. CMR, which we see in a lot of the references to some of the state laws, stands for the Code of Massachusetts Regulations. We modified the common driveway definition by deleting the last part of it. So it simply will state a driveway which provides access to more than one lot. Parcel is an area of land in one ownership with definite boundaries, not necessarily meeting zoning requirements nor available for use for the site of principal use dwellings. Definitive plan, added a little bit of language there, noting that the plan needs to be recorded with the Registry of Deeds or filed with the Land Court when approved by the board. We struck a few words from sidewalk away within the right-of-way of a street designed for use by pedestrians. Standard specifications, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Highways. Standard specifications for highways and bridges is what we are referring to. A collector street is a street which, in the opinion of the board, is being used or will be used as a secondary road between local streets and the nearest major street. Local street, a street which in the opinion of the board is being used or will be used primarily to provide access to abutting lots and which will not be used for through traffic. A couple of changes to subdivision, some strike-throughs there. And noting that every lot within the tract divided has frontage of at least the length that is required by the zoning bylaw, and the frontage is on a public way, a way shown on a plan previously approved, a way that was already in existence when the subdivision control law became effective. And in addition, conveyances or other instruments adding to or taking away from or changing the size and shape of lots so as not to leave any affected lot without the required frontage shall not constitute a subdivision, nor shall the division or tract of land in which two or more buildings were standing when the subdivision control law went into effect as separate lots. We reduced the length of the definition for trail by removing the words usually through undeveloped land, modified private utilities. Rather than saying this term shall include telephone, it just says television, television, fiber cable, etc. Public utilities, it's the same change, adding electric rather than this term shall include electric. Just trying to simplify it. Way was changed to any route for passage, whether public or private, or the width and length of the strip of land laid out, designated, acquired, and or dedicated to be used as a way, including spaces for vehicular travel, sidewalks, and planting spaces where required. Approval not required. Let me see. Removing a couple of terms and adding a few regarding the preparation of plans for the construction or actual construction of ways. More than one building for dwelling purposes on a lot. No lot in a subdivision shall be used in any way that is not in compliance with the town's zoning bylaw, where the zoning bylaw permits dwelling or the use of more than one building for dwelling purposes. On a lot, the board may make the approval of subdivision conditional upon the developers providing adequate access to each site for building in the same manner as otherwise required for lots within a subdivision. We're going to have to make an amendment to that based on the new ADU law at the state level. These recommended changes were done last winter and spring, so I will make a note to amend that to be in agreement with the law. All application fees and expenses related to the review and where applicable, the approval of subdivisions or to their construction, but not limited to advertising, publication of notices, review of preliminary or definitive plans by town staff or consultants, inspections during the application process, as well as during and after construction. And then we struck through some of the existing requirements there. Under fees payable, it's a new subsection. The fees and expenses payable shall be set out on the schedule of fees and expenses payable in terms of the rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land in Paxton, or also known as the fee schedule, as approved by the board from time to time. Application fees are to be submitted per the fee schedule, and the application will be deemed incomplete and will not be considered by the board until the fees are paid. The fee schedule, either with regard to waivers requested or to engineering or other departmental reviews, the applicant shall correct the shortfall within 7 days. And that is if consultant fees end up being more than what the application fee had been. Lots of strike-throughs. The fee schedule, the board shall stop all progress of inspections at the site. If there are fees due after the construction is done, if anything's left over, it'd be reimbursed. Oh, no, this one is to the board if any costs are incurred. Compliance with these rules and regulations. Strict compliance with the requirements of these rules and regulations may be waived. When in the judgment of the board, such action is in the public interest and not inconsistent with subdivision control laws. Subdivision must apply with the zoning bylaw. And the building commissioner shall not issue any permit until first satisfied that the lot is not within a subdivision or a way that gives access to the lot as required by the subdivision control law is shown on an approved and recorded plan, and that any conditions the approved plan that limit the right to erect or maintain buildings on that particular lot have been satisfied.
So Jane, before we go on to section 3, I think there's a lot here, and I don't know if there's any questions. I know one question that comes to mind is on the common driveways that are referred to in the subdivision rules. Should we be saying the same number as what we put in the zoning bylaws and sticking the 2?
They would need to be consistent.
Okay, so we should go in and just say 2 instead of the current definition that's there?
The definition stated that a common driveway serves more than one lot, but we want to make sure under zoning, it's a maximum of 2, and it doesn't say that in subdivision.
Then the subdivision would need to be corrected to
Comply.
be inconsistent,
Right, okay.
consistent with the zoning bylaws.
Okay.
Okay.
See, it says right there, driveway which provides access to more than one lot, but it should be, or a maximum of 2.
Okay.
Well, I don't think you're gonna have 1.5, right?
Exactly, yes.
You could just say provides access to, because there's no
Yeah.
in between.
And then the only downside is if we ever update that, we're gonna have to remember that's in 2 spots.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so section 3. Oh, sorry.
Section 3, under procedure for submission and approval of plans. Let me see. You must submit 2 copies of the completed application form, the required fee per the schedule of fees, an electronic copy of the plan that meets the current version of the Mass GIS standard for digital plan submission to municipalities. And for those who aren't familiar, GIS is Geographic Information System, which is a computer mapping software. Electronic copy in PDF format, an original printed plan, 8 full-size copies of the plan, 1 copy of the plan reduced to 11 by 17, if the original is larger than this size, and whatever evidence is available and sufficient to show that the plan does not require approval. Is this under A&R?
I believe so.
Okay. The subdivision with a covering letter addressed to the board shall be made at a regular or special planning board meeting, and a copy of the letter shall be sent to the town clerk. and the date of the meeting at which the application is submitted shall constitute the date of submission. The plan shall be prepared by a Massachusetts registered land surveyor or professional engineer. The plan shall be at a scale of at least 1 inch equals 40 feet, or a scale appropriate to the project proposed. With the sheet size no more than 36 inches by 24 inches and no less than 9.5 inches by 14 inches. The contents on the plan shall include identification of the plan by name and address, the name of the applicant, if those are different, the book and page number in the Worcester Registry of Deeds for the subject property, the assessor's tax map and lot number, and the area and frontage in feet of the property, and the scale and north arrow and the date. I got several strike-throughs over there. Zoning classification and location of any zoning district boundaries on the lot with a locus plan, which is a smaller plan showing where the lot is located in the town. Site information showing the floodplains, waterways, wetlands, relevant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Rivers Protection Act. And the applicant, if the applicant has been denied access to some of the required information, the plan shall contain as much of the information as was accessible and shall describe any limitation encountered. In the case of the creation of a new lot, all the remaining contiguous land area and frontage of the land owned by the applicant shall be shown. Notice of any decisions regarding the land or any buildings on it, including but not limited to.
You're doing well.
It's hard reading with all these strike-throughs and additions.
Move it up, Heather, just, there you go.
Where was I?
Not limited to,
Limited to.
yeah, down another one.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I lost my spot.
Still the bottom.
Oh, it's not showing, okay.
Yeah, keep going down, there, 3,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the whole thing.
Limited to variances and special permits, as well as the deed book and page numbers where the decisions are recorded in the Worcester Registry of Deeds. No change to these next two subsections. Some change to how we're wording the requirement for the name and address of the seal and address of the engineer or surveyor who made the plan. Bearings and distances of all lot lines shown on the plan to the nearest permanent monument. The location and description of boundaries, fences, walls, easements, or encumbrances, including location of existing trails and other pertinent information. If a plan shows any parcel or parcels which are not intended as a building lot, the following statement shall be required. Not a building lot. No further building may occur without further approval by the planning board pursuant to the subdivision control law. And then additional requirements. Refer the A&R or approval not required endorsement must be on the plans if that is such the case in terms of the subdivision control law. and whether the existing horizontal or vertical alignment of the roadway are such that the roadway can be safely and regularly driven on by people who need to gain access to the property, and whether they provide safe visibility. The next one just adds, it changes the plural provision to the singular provisions to provision. Under the standard for the town clerk, if a way is maintained and used as a public way, and an applicant requests the town clerk to certify that it is a public way, the town clerk shall submit to the board written evidence of public maintenance officially paid for by the town. Under planning board action, endorsement of the planning board for approval not required or not requiring approval. The board shall determine that the plan does not require approval within 21 days of receiving a complete submission, and the plans will be stamped with those words, approval under the subdivision control law not required, and the remainder of that subsection is deleted. Just a little bit of change in some of the language, like from determines to decides, the determination or its decision of its reasons for the decision. And that's in regard to, I believe, the findings for the planning board's decision. If the board determines that the plan does require approval, then the applicant may submit a plan for approval under these rules and regulations and under the provisions of the subdivision control law. And then failure of the board to act, if they fail to act within 21 days after the plan submission, it shall be deemed to have determined that the approval under the subdivision control law is not required, and it shall immediately endorse the plan. And if it doesn't do so, the town clerk shall issue a certificate to the same effect. Preliminary plan eliminated some of the language there for submitting a preliminary plan, changed the term subdivider to applicant, added the word "the" in front of building commissioner, instead of saying of such subdivision, the proposed subdivision was put in its place. And then listing of the items that the applicant would need to file with the planning board, such as 2 copies of the plans, the required fee, the electronic copy, PDF format, the original printed plan, 12 full-size copies of the plan, and 3 copies of the plan reduced to 11 by 17. And after submission, the town clerk will be sent a copy of the application. It's a technicality, but I would change registered mail to certified mail in 3.2.1.2. Second line. Registered mail is typically for things that are valuable or irreplaceable. So certified mail is just proof of delivery. Administrative contents of the preliminary plan. That section was crossed out and some new language was included, including the legal identification of the land, including the deed book and page numbers where the ownership is recorded at the Worcester District Registry of Deeds. Several other sections were lined out. The first page shall contain an index of all the pages provided and what is contained on each page. Each additional page shall have in the lower right-hand corner the subdivision name, the page number, the date of the plan preparation, and space to record revision dates and the planning board actions. Shall also include the names of all abutters as determined from the most recent assessor's records, as well as the assessor's map and lot numbers. A notice of the decision regarding the land or any buildings on it, including but not limited to variances and special permits, as well as the deed book and page numbers where the decisions are recorded in the Worcester District Registry of Deeds. So the detailed information on the plan includes major features of the land, such as existing walls, fences, trails, monuments, etc., and the plan shall indicate which features are to be retained and which are to be removed. An analysis of the limitations for on-site septic systems associated with each soil type that occurs in the proposed subdivision as determined by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. All floodplains, waterways, and wetland resource areas relevant to the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Rivers Protection Act at a scale of 1 inch site and within 100 feet of the property, locations of wells on the site and within 100 feet of the property, and the front, side, and rear building setbacks. Shall also include, an approximate description of the proposed and any known existing surface drainage within and outside the area shown on the plan, and a general description of the proposed and any known existing sewage disposal system or water installation within the outside of the area shown on the plan, including adjacent existing natural waterways intended to receive drainage discharge. Easements and rights-of-way applicable to the area shown on the plan, including their widths, lengths, and purposes, location and description of all boundaries, fences, walls, or encumbrances, the names, approximate location, and width of adjacent streets, all of streets within 1,000 feet of the subdivision shown on the locust plan and where possible on the plan sheets, the existing and approximate proposed lines of streets, ways, easements, and any public or common areas within the subdivision, identification of the proposed streets by letters rather than by names, the profiles of existing grades and approximate proposed finished grades of the roadway.
You're awesome. I can't read that.
So Jane, as we keep going through here, I know there's some like brand new sections and then there's some, smaller details where we've just crossed them out and moved on. And I think based on the hour, we should probably try to focus on the, there's a few more pieces here that are brand new and see if we can
Sure.
kind of go more summary.
Okay. Information on intended waiver applications must be annotated on the plan. In each case, the annotation shall include information of the relevant section of the regulations it refers to. Acceptance of the application. Let me see. The planning board shall have 14 days from the date of submission of a preliminary plan to decide whether the application is complete. And some of this is consistent with some of the previous definitive plan, et cetera, as far as the process and the timeline for responding to the applicant. After reviewing the preliminary plan and at its discretion with the consultants or other town boards and departments, the board may give its approval with or without revisions and recommendations. If, in the event that the board should disapprove the preliminary plan, they should return to the applicant the plans with a notice of the decision shall be provided to the applicant and the town clerk in writing within 45 days, unless an extension has been requested. And like the others, very similar application requirements for the definitive plan as we had with the preliminary plan. After submission to the town clerk, a copy of the application should be sent, oh, it says registered or certified mail, with the notice of the date of submission. The board shall distribute copies to the Board of Selectmen. We can change that to Select Board. The town clerk, the Paxton Municipal Light Department, Highway Superintendent, and Building Commissioner, and Board of Health, as well as the Conservation Commission, Police, Fire, Water Departments, et cetera. The plan to be drawn at a scale of 40 feet to the inch. If it requires more than 2 sheets, an extra plan shall be provided at a scale appropriate to show the subdivision on one 24 by 36 inch sheet. Shall include the subdivision name, any boundaries, the date and scale, the north arrow, and
Jane, it appears that a lot of this is just like administrative stuff. I mean, you just
Yeah.
kind of cleaned up certain sections, but, I mean, there weren't a lot of, I'll say, updates or changes. We just kind of,
no, I think the changes are more in the later chapters when we get into roadway widths
Okay.
and drainage type
so,
stuff.
Heather, can we kind of blow?
We want to see if there are questions
Well,
on sections
yeah, I'm
1
just
through
looking,
3.
you've got like 10 minutes left here, and I want to make,
Ooh.
I know, so.
It's almost my bedtime.
I'm just curious what you did with the surety for the town. I didn't get to see, I don't know where that comes in of a definitive plan acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's actually there.
I would have to look for it. Mike worked on this.
Okay, I mean,
section.
just in the past, we had 3 methods of surety, and I think they're probably there. I don't, it's standard practices, you would allow all 3 to be used by the petitioner.
Suggested came up somewhere around page 19. Let's see if there's any more substantial. Is there anything else substantive in this section? It's a very long section.
There you go, acceptance of application.
What was that?
That was acceptance of application, so I'm just, I want
Did you
to,
want me to go back, Dan?
no, just keep going. We just want to get to surety.
So according to this, it was on page 19.
Heather, can you just turn your mic on?
Oh, I can do that. According to this, it was on page 19. Performance guarantee, the
Yeah.
access.
Yes.
any- Are
Right
not
there, bonds and
completed.
surety.
Yeah.
But not approved.
So it doesn't specify in that
Well,
statement.
keep going, let's move it down a little bit further.
Oh, bonds or surety.
Okay, it comes up more. You want the next one?
Okay, so there's a covenant, surety, tri-party agreement. Okay, they're all, just so that they're still there. So
You good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay. All right. All right, so are there any questions on this first part of the subdivision rules and regs? So the first sections through the end of section 3. Nothing in the audience. Robin's still with us, but she doesn't seem to have a question on this. So I think we're okay. All right, so we'll go on to the second part. And again, anyone at home who has additional questions, if they have a chance to read this, or they'd like to ask something, they can just reach out. But all of this language is on the town's website for further, closer review. Okay. So I'm just gonna scroll.
Robin's got a question for you.
Robin has a question? Oh, okay. Robin, do you want to unmute? Did you have a question? Neil thought you had a question.
I think she said it pertains to that section.
Yes, I had a question and I put it in the chat. I'll read it from the chat. It says, do any of these bylaws, specifically the ones that you were talking about, building and addition and so forth, just in this long discussion, cover invasive species, rather addressing them and ensuring that there is no further spreading in town? Because we have a significant knotweed problem in this town, and whenever you build, you are disrupting soil and creating further issues. And I'm just wondering if there are any bylaws, whether in this particular section or the upcoming section, that addresses invasive species issues, specifically knotweed, within the town of Paxton.
I would have to do a search on that.
I don't think so. And just for clarification, Robin, what we're going through right now are the actual subdivision rules and regs, so they're separate from the bylaws. So they're a little easier to update because they just go back to the planning board for a public hearing and a vote, as opposed to the bylaws have to go to public hearing and then town meeting. But we can, I think Jane said she'll look into that.
Yes.
Some of that may fall under the Conservation Commission too, because they review plans in terms of site disturbance and all that kind of stuff, so you,
Yeah, there are sections within the subdivision regs where we talk about narrowing the streets and preserving more of the natural vegetation and not disturbing as much area.
Right.
But I can definitely check to see if that's on there. And as we did tonight, if there are any questions that we couldn't answer entirely,
That's on there, and questions that we couldn't answer entirely.
that's going back through.
Click on echoes.
Yep.
thank you. We'll start next week with any answers that we found on the questions that came up tonight.
Right, I mean, because this gets very lengthy.
Yes, it's very lengthy.
Very technical.
45 pages in this section.
I would just say too, Jane, I think the average person in town and their concerns about travel lanes and road width and things, would you characterize these as more of a developer? No, I wouldn't even say issue, but probably a benefit to developers. You're paving less, you're
It is.
disturbing less, you're so
Right,
these
because
are
there's less roadway to be
Right.
paved. And as we mentioned earlier, we worked extensively with the fire chief
Yep.
and the highway superintendent on all of these to make sure that emergency access was still adequate and that the snowplows and other roadway maintenance vehicles could access these roadways to properly maintain them. So
Yeah.
it's less snow plowing, it's less
Right.
paving.
Right, good for the town, good for the finances, good for the environment, and probably not incredibly impactful to the general citizen of
Correct.
Paxton.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In the essence of time, do we need to go through everything, or?
What would you say, Jane, are the key things that we changed in this set of the subdivision rules and regs? So we've obviously touched the street sizes.
Yes, and I'll reiterate that a lot of these changes were as a result of the Fuss and O'Neill study.
Correct.
To try to meet the requirements for the town's stormwater permit. This town does have 4 years to come into compliance with those EPA requirements, and if they do not, they'll start getting fined daily. So we'd like to get ahead of it and implement these strategies to disturb less area, reduce stormwater runoff, and just make a healthier environment for us all.
Okay, so just breezing through really quick, can you just touch on some of the changes we did to cul-de-sacs?
Well, I think if you just put the tables up there, Heather.
Okay.
Some of them are, I mean, we can discuss what went down, like maximum, stop right there, number 4, maximum right-of-way for arterial streets, I believe it was 90 feet, it's now 80 feet, you know, things like that. Everything is downsized, and when we got the cul-de-sacs, instead of making a, what is it, 120-foot circle, because it would be a 60-foot radius, so I think we're down a little bit, but we allowed for the middle of the cul-de-sac to be left natural, so that
Correct.
water could, you know, permeate back instead of going, like you said, out into the stormwater management system.
Right.
And again, we made sure that emergency vehicles could still get around that cul-de-sac. So
Correct.
it makes it easier for the snowplows. All of these things are hopefully to improve the ability of the town to maintain after acceptance is taken. So I believe that they're all,
And that would only apply to any new subdivisions
Correct,
going
new.
forward. You know, anything that's pre-existing is fine the way it is.
correct.
Do we want to keep going through this, or do we think there's any other sections that people at home might be most interested in?
I would suggest that anybody that has interest, get a copy of this read it, and then bring us questions, because it is very, very involved. This
Yes.
is, as Roberta said, it's not, most of the residents really aren't gonna be aware of what these are, nor, I think, are they going to care about this. But as the planning board, we review all this with our town consultant engineer and the petitioner to make sure that we're all in agreement as to what's happening. And some of them are very specific. But other than that, I mean, it's our job to make sure that they comply with what we're proposing as changes, or what they've complied with that we've had in place over the past whatever. So,
Okay.
That's true.
does anybody at home watch, I mean, if they feel differently, we can, I think if they review it and have a question, we can answer it, instead of going through all of the administrative and changes and strikeouts.
Absolutely. Okay. Any questions from the audience? We have a smaller audience than what we started with. And any questions at home? All right. Well, thank you, Jane.
Yeah, you're right on time.
So at that point, it concludes this evening. Our next information session, for those who are interested in tuning in or watching afterwards, is on Wednesday, October 2nd. We'll be covering some variety of subjects: wireless communications in Section 8, marijuana in Section 3.314, solar, Section 11, and signs in Section 12. Again, if you're at home, you have any questions, you can check our website under zoning bylaws update on the top right of the homepage on the website. There's a couple links there, including all of the informational sheets we've been posting, the red line versions. We'll update the questions with answers that Jane provided tonight under the relevant sections from last week. And under last week's videos, if you missed any of them, we did try to do a timestamp so you know when to click on each of those videos broken down, so you can get the specific section you're looking for. And in a couple days, we'll do the same for this evening. Again, if you have any questions, you can reach out. My email is hmonroe@townofpaxton.net. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.